Our longship cuts silently through a cold, morning fog. From the sagas of the Viking Age comes a story of such calculated horror, it has haunted our imagination for centuries, the ritual known as the Blood Eagle. This video will reconstruct a victim's final moments by separating brutal historical fact from even more brutal legend. You will gain a clear understanding of what this ritual might have truly entailed, from the poetry of ancient stories to the stark reality of forensic science. Was this a real practice or a terrifying myth crafted by later poets? We will examine the bones that whisper of a possible answer and the medical steps that make even experts shudder. What does our fascination with such a dark legend say about how we remember the past? Our story begins not with an archaeologist's trowel, but with the vellum pages of ancient manuscripts. The most vivid accounts of the Blood Eagle come from two epic Old Norse texts, the Orkneyinga saga and Ragnar's saga Lothbrok. These are not dry historical records, they are sweeping family legends, filled with heroes, feuds, and poetic justice written down 200 years or more after the Viking Age had ended. In their pages, we find the tale that cemented the Blood Eagle in history's darkest corners. It is a story of revenge so profound it demanded a punishment beyond any ordinary execution. The saga tells of the legendary Viking hero, Ragnar Lothbrok, who was captured by King Ælla of Northumbria. King Ælla, according to the story, had Ragnar thrown into a pit of venomous snakes, where he met an agonizing end. When Ragnar's sons learned of their father's fate, their grief transformed into a cold, relentless fury. They raised a great army, conquered Northumbria, and captured King Ælla. But mere death was insufficient. To avenge the profound dishonor done to their father, they decreed that Ælla would die by the Blood Eagle. The saga's description is both horrifyingly specific and poetically stark. The victim is placed face down. A skilled hand wields a sharp blade, carving the outline of an eagle into the living back. The ribs are then methodically severed from the spine, one by one, and pulled outward, like the skeletal wings of a great bird. Finally, the lungs are drawn out from the cavity and draped over those bloody wings. In some versions of the tale, salt is then sprinkled onto the exposed organs. The imagery is impossible to forget, a tableau of ultimate suffering designed to echo through the ages, but we must ask a critical question here. What was the true purpose of this scene in the saga? The writers were not forensic scientists documenting a procedure. They were storytellers crafting a myth. For them, the Blood Eagle served several powerful literary functions. First, it was the ultimate symbol of humiliation, reducing a proud king to a sacrificed animal, his body transformed into a grotesque offering. Second, it framed the sons of Ragnar as figures of terrifying, almost supernatural prowess, men who commanded not just victory in battle, but the very rituals of death. Some scholars even suggest it was portrayed as a sacrifice to Odin, the god of war and death, who was associated with eagles. The Blood Eagle in the sagas is less a historical report and more a narrative device, a piece of poetic horror designed to show the absolute extremes of Viking vengeance and to cement a family's legendary status. It tells us what later Norse society believed their fierce ancestors were capable of, which is a very different thing from proving they actually did it. This leaves us standing at a crossroads between powerful myth and tangible history. If the sagas are our only source, then the Blood Eagle remains a terrifying story, a legend of ultimate vengeance. But could there be physical proof, something carved not in vellum but in bone? The archaeological record, so far, offers no definitive answer. We have never uncovered a skeleton from the Viking Age with a label reading victim of the Blood Eagle. The nature of Viking burial practices makes such a discovery incredibly unlikely. Many high-status individuals were cremated, turning all soft tissue to ash. Even in inhumation burials over 1,000 years, skin, muscle, and organs completely decay, leaving only the skeleton behind. Any ritual that focused solely on manipulating soft tissue would vanish without a trace. This absence of evidence has led some prominent scholars to argue that the blood eagle never happened at all. The historian Roberta Frank proposed a fascinating alternative. She suggested that the saga writers may have misunderstood their own ancient poetry. In the complex, metaphorical language of skaldic verse, a phrase like to carve an eagle on someone could have simply been a poetic kenning, a figurative way to say to kill with a sword. Later writers, taking this vivid poetry literally, might have invented the gruesome procedure as a dramatic set piece for their stories. It is a compelling argument that reminds us how easily metaphor can harden into supposed fact over centuries of retelling. Yet just when the case seems closed, archaeology offers a whisper, a single chilling piece of evidence that refuses to be ignored. In 2009, construction workers on Ridgeway Hill in Dorset, England, uncovered a mass grave. The remains were of around 50 young men, all decapitated, dating to the Viking age. Forensic analysis showed they were likely captured Vikings, executed by Anglo-Saxons. But one skeleton stood out. On the back of this man's vertebrae, archaeologists found a series of deep, parallel knife cuts. The marks were not from combat. They were deliberate, methodical incisions across the spine. Could these be the marks of a ritual carving, the first physical evidence of a blood eagle attempted or completed? Or are they simply the brutal but non-ritualistic wounds of a frenzied killing, a back hacked at in anger after death? This single set of bones cannot prove the saga's full, horrific ceremony, but it does prove something profoundly important, that in the violence of that era, people were capable of inflicting precise, post-mortem cuts on the back of a defeated enemy. It moves the blood eagle from the realm of pure fantasy into the shadowy borderland of the possible. The Ridgeway Hill skeleton does not solve the mystery, it deepens it. We are left with a haunting puzzle, a vivid literary tradition on one side, a profound absence of proof on the other, and in the middle, one man's bones etched with questions we may never fully answer. The Ridgeway Hill skeleton provides a silent, bony question mark. To move from possibility to a clearer picture, we must shift our perspective from the poet to the physician. Let us engage in a grim thought experiment, partnering with the hypothetical expertise of a forensic pathologist. If the blood eagle was attempted, what would it have actually entailed step by step on a living human body? This is not about myth, but about muscle, bone, and the brutal limits of human endurance. First, the tools. A Viking craftsman would likely use what was at hand, a sharp seax, the single-edged knife every free man carried, or perhaps the point of a spear. These were tools designed for cutting and piercing, not for the delicate work of surgery. The victim is positioned face down, perhaps bound. The first cut is not a shallow symbol, it is a deep, committed incision through the skin and the formidable latissimus dorsi muscles, the broad muscles of the back. This alone would be a wound of shocking severity, causing immediate and profuse bleeding. Now comes the most technically demanding phase, the separation of the ribs from the spine. The ribs are attached to the thoracic vertebrae by strong ligaments and joints. The practitioner would need to work the blade carefully into these spaces, severing the connections one by one along each rib, from the neck down to the lower back. The goal, as described, is to pull the rib cage outward, creating those skeletal wings. But here lies a critical danger. The pleura, the delicate membrane lining the lung cavity, sits just inside the rib cage. A slip of the blade by even a fraction of an inch would puncture this lining, causing the lung to collapse, a condition called a pneumothorax. This could bring a swift, if agonizing, end. This leads us to the central, horrifying question of the entire procedure. Could a victim survive long enough for the final, iconic act, the extraction of the lungs? The physiological reality is a race between blood loss, shock, and trauma. Some medical historians argue that massive blood loss from the initial deep back wounds would lead to unconsciousness within minutes, as the brain is starved of oxygen. A punctured lung would accelerate this dramatically. However, a different, more chilling theory exists. If the wielder was exceptionally skilled or exceptionally lucky and managed to avoid the major arteries like the aorta and did not puncture the lung cavity, the victim might remain conscious for a longer period. The pain would be unimaginable, a symphony of nerve signals screaming from the back, compounded by the profound shock of the body being systematically opened. In this nightmarish scenario, survival for several minutes is within the realm of grim possibility, long enough for the ribs to be levered outward and for the lungs, which are not freely sitting in the chest but are attached by root-like structures, to be roughly drawn out onto the bloody framework. The final image from the sagas, the lungs draping over the ribs like wings, is perhaps the most medically problematic. A living lung is spongy and would not hold such a shape, it would more likely slump. This detail may be the clearest signal of poetic embellishment, a storyteller's flourish to complete the avian metaphor. What this forensic reconstruction reveals is not a clean, ritualized procedure, but a messy, agonizing, and highly unstable form of torture. Whether intended as a sacrifice or the ultimate humiliation, its success, as described, would rely on a macabre combination of anatomical knowledge and sheer, brutal chance. It stands at the very edge of what is physiologically possible, a fact that makes its lingering presence in our imagination all the more unsettling. Even the most horrific acts can carry a meaning that transcends simple cruelty. To understand the blood eagle, we must look past the blade and into the Viking mind, into a world where gods walked among men and every action resonated with symbolic power. If this ritual was ever performed, it was almost certainly more than torture. It was a statement carved in flesh, a message intended for both the mortal and the divine realms. At the center of this dark symbolism stands Odin, the one-eyed All-Father, god of war, poetry, magic, and death. Odin's own myths are filled with self-sacrifice and a relentless pursuit of hidden knowledge. He famously hanged himself from the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to gain the secrets of the runes. This imagery of suspension, piercing, and willing suffering for a higher purpose creates a disturbing template. A victim subjected to the blood eagle could be seen as a perverse reflection of Odin's ordeal, a forced sacrifice to the god who mastered sacrifice itself. The eagle itself is a key symbol here. 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, were Odin's constant companions, but the eagle was also sacred to him. It was a creature of the high air, a symbol of supreme vision and ruthless predation. On the battlefield, eagles were the ultimate scavengers, descending after the fighting to feast on the slain. By carving an eagle into a living back, the practitioners may have been performing a grim act of sympathetic magic, attempting to summon the god's favor by mimicking his sacred animal and offering him a unique tribute, a sacrifice that was still breathing. This leads to the most chilling symbolic interpretation, the role of the lungs. In Old Norse, the word for breath, earned, is also the word for spirit or life force. To extract the lungs and drape them outward could be interpreted as a direct offering of the victim's very breath and spirit to Odin, a final, violent transfer of life energy from the condemned to the divine. Some scholars theorize the entire ritual aimed to transform the victim into an eagle in the moments before death, creating a living, suffering conduit to the god. The social and psychological functions were equally powerful. For a community, witnessing or hearing of such an act served as a tool of absolute terror. It sent an unmistakable message to enemies: this is the fate that awaits those who cross us. It demonstrated a terrifying elite knowledge, perhaps associated with Satyr, the Norse magic often linked to Odin, a magic that blurred the lines between ritual and anatomy. For the warrior who ordered or performed it, the blood eagle was the ultimate act of vengeance, a deed so extreme it guaranteed his name would be sung in sagas for centuries. His reputation was no longer built merely on bravery in battle, but on a mastery of the rituals of death itself. In this light, the blood eagle becomes a dark nexus of religion, politics, and social power. It was a performance where the stage was a human body, the actors were warriors and priests, and the intended audience spanned from trembling enemies in this world to a watchful, one-eyed god in the next. The horror of the act was precisely the point. Its brutality was the language in which its message was written. We are left then with a profound duality, a story etched in two very different mediums. On one hand, we have the vivid poetry of the sagas, a narrative of wings carved from bone and breath offered to the gods. On the other, we have the silent, ambiguous testimony of a single skeleton from Ridgeway Hill, marked by knife cuts that whisper of a violence both precise and intimate. The forensic thought experiment pulls these threads together, revealing a procedure perched on the very knife edge of physiological possibility, a ritual so unstable it borders on the chaotic. So where does this leave our search for truth? The full, graphic blood eagle as a prolonged, survivable ceremony, as described in the epic tales, is likely a literary amplification, a horror magnified by generations of storytellers to crown their heroes with the ultimate aura of fearsome power. Yet to dismiss it as pure fiction is to misunderstand the Viking world. Archaeology at sites like the fortress of Trelleborg or the bog sacrifices of Scandinavia shows us a culture deeply comfortable with ritualized, extreme violence, from decapitations to offerings meant to bridge the human and divine. The Vikings were undoubtedly capable of it. The terrifying power of the blood eagle legend does not hinge on its historical frequency, but on its perfect embodiment of the Viking Age itself, that potent and unsettling mix of artistry and brutality, of profound spiritual belief wielded with terrifying physical force. It represents the darkest potential of a society that could produce exquisite metalwork and vast poetic sagas, yet also see the human body as a canvas for messages to both mortals and gods. This leaves us with one final, haunting question. For you, does the historical uncertainty make the legend more or less terrifying? Is it scarier to think it was a real, documented practice, or that the human imagination is powerful enough to invent such a thing and have it echo so convincingly for 1,000 years? The line between the stories we tell about the past and the often unknowable reality is perilously thin. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you found this journey into the shadows of history compelling, subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that shape our understanding of who we were and perhaps who we are.